Thank you, and please be seated. Well, welcome to today's member forum meeting. As always, safety information to start with. I'd like to draw your attention to the emergency evacuation procedure. As always, please exit the building from the nearest exit, quite possibly the front door, and congregate by the cathedral. Full details of the questions submitted to member forum and the written replies were published on the council's website. I think we all know how this goes, so we'll go straight in with our questions. So first we've got green question 1 from Councillor Gemfrey. Councillor Gemfrey, you've got 2 supplementaries on Barton House evacuation for Councillor Parsons, should you wish.
Thank you. Sorry, Lord Mayor, my apologies, I haven't been to members' forum before. Do I summarise my question?
You've got a written response to your question, so you now have a chance to ask a supplementary question.
My apologies.
You had 2 questions, you can ask 2 supplementary.
My apologies. Okay. I will have no further questions then. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now we move on to Labour question 1, which is from Councillor Alexander on the housing crisis. First, we have a verbal response from Councillor Dyer.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Alexander, for the question. The reality and the honest answer is I have not been successful in bringing forward any of the currently 14, it's actually now 16,000 homes with planning permission. Some of those homes are being under construction and some are still subject to S106. There are a number of reasons why we have not been successful going forward. Some of those are to do with local issues, but others are to do with, as I'm sure you're aware, the national situation at the moment. We also have serious problems with viability, and in some instances, the only way we would be able to bring some of those planning applications forward without additional grant funding would be by reducing the amount of affordable housing, and I'm sure all in this chamber do not want to take that approach. But yes, as at present, I have not been successful. Thank you.
Councillor Alexander, you have a supplementary.
Thank you. And regarding the many applications by private developers outstanding in the city where they have got the planning permission but not expedited it in order to build homes, have you had a chance to lobby any of those to get on with their work and make the best of those planning permissions?
The answer to that is yes. We've recently, in some instances, what we've had to do is terminate agreement with at least one developer because we felt we were not making the progress we needed in terms of delivering affordable housing. We're also in discussions with several other private developers who have come forward with and received planning permissions but have not proceeded. And we should be able to update members on those, and particularly, I suspect it will come to your briefings as one of the chairs of development relatively shortly.
Thank you. I have one more supplementary, do I?
I think you just had one question, didn't you, Councillor Alexander?
I did. Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much. So I note that Councillor Coombs isn't here, so we move on to Conservative question 1, closure threat to city museums. Councillor Weston, you've got 2 supplementaries for Councillor Dyer.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. Just to point out, I don't actually think you've answered question 1, and should point out you probably haven't answered Councillor Michelat's question as well, because I asked for a social and cultural assessment, and he asked for an economic assessment, and you've talked about an equalities impact assessment. They are quite different. But so, my supplementary question, on the future alternative models, how far along are those discussions and proposals for these future alternative models, or is it back of a fag packet?
At the moment, Councillor Weston, they are very much preliminary, and that is because no final decision has been made yet about whether to go ahead with the closures. There are discussions that are ongoing. I believe those discussions have also been shared with the cultural working group that has been set up and met yesterday.
Thank you. Second supplementary then, please, my Lord Mayor. The discussions on the future alternative models, is there a report or anything else that can be shared with me that I can have a look at to see what assessments have been made?
I can find out for you if there's something available for a briefing for yourself. That would probably be once we get closer to making a decision about whether this is one of the savings we're going to proceed with.
Okay. Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor.
So, Green question 2 on missed bin collections. That's from Councillor Thomas. You've got 2 supplementaries for Councillor Fodor.
I don't think that my second question has been answered, which is where we have got missed bin collections, it's really helpful if residents could be able to go to the website and see when their next visit is due. And this is something, you know, having run a service business that does, you know, thousands of kind of tests every week, updating a website on a daily basis would be quite a straightforward thing to do and would make life much easier for residents who've put their bins out and don't know when the actual collection is going to take place. So my request is that there's a sort of very, you know, that there's a very specific role in Bristol Waste that updates the website on a daily basis, so that, you know, of course there's going to be sickness and challenges around collections, but at least residents can then be informed properly. So I'd really appreciate it, Martin, if you could progress that. So my kind of first supplementary question is, you know, following on from the reply, what were the sickness rates like in December 24 versus December 23, so that we can see whether there is a genuine problem there, so that we've got a kind of pattern that we can identify, and then we can see whether the resourcing is adequate. And then I think my second supplementary question would be, how many streets in the city have had more than one missed collection in December? Because I think what we're getting, what we get is a pattern, or what's most concerning. You know, if you have one collection in 8 that's missed, you could probably live with it. If you get 2 or 3 in a row, it's really challenging. So we need some key performance indicators on the Bristol Waste dashboard, or at least Bristol Waste to be reporting on streets with multiple missed collections. So that would be, is that possible, please, Martin?
Right, thank you. Thank you. So in answer to the first point, I'm not sure what the difference is 1 year on from the previous December. I will try and find out. Obviously, there has been a very high sickness level, plus other problems such as broken vehicles during the recent December, and that had an impact. But I'm not sure the comparator with the year before. In terms of the second the second one, that's something I've definitely already raised. I'll chase that and try and let you know, because multiple missed collections is the most frustrating for residents. I know it's happened in streets where I live and where other people, obviously in my ward, live, who are very keen to see that addressed. And we need to find out if there are recurrent missed streets in particular, because that means there's a pattern rather than something exceptional. So I'm going to try and push for an answer to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And can I also welcome Councillor Fodor back to the chamber after your unfortunate accident over the Christmas period, and I wish you a speedy recovery. Welcome back. So let's move on to Labour question 2 on the Waking Watch. This is Councillor Peat. You've got 1 supplementary for Councillor Parsons.
Thank you. So I was wondering that, because you said that we'll get the money we'll get from selling off existing homes could be invested into building new ones elsewhere. Considering that you've pulled out 2 council housing deals in 7 months, and with another 2 in your sights for the next year, can you explain why we should believe that you are committed to building new council homes anywhere in Bristol?
Well, thank you for your question, Councillor Peat. So, as you know, the proposals for the housing revenue account are still subject to council approval. They've been developed along with the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee. We actually had a workshop session on our investment proposals last year, which I think it would have been helpful if Labour members had been able to attend that, since no members actually bothered to turn up. So we are very committed to doing whatever we can to solve the housing crisis in Bristol, and we are doing that through all of the means that we can. So it's absolutely right that right now we are prioritising investment in our existing housing stock so that we can deal with the vast build-up of repairs issues, damp and mould problems, all the legacy of years and decades of underinvestment and neglect in our existing homes. We are also building new council homes within the housing revenue account, so that is continuing. And in order to make sure that we're continuing to deliver new social rent homes and other affordable housing products for the city, we're working along with our partners, particularly housing associations, in order to deliver homes through Gorham and elsewhere. So you can be absolutely sure that we share an aspiration to deliver new council homes and new social rent homes for Bristol. But really, the reality is that given the appalling underinvestment that we've had in the existing homes that we own for so long, we need to do that along with our partners, and we need support to do that from government. So we are awaiting the government's affordable housing settlement later this year, and that's really going to determine, not only for us in Bristol, but across the country, whether we're going to be able to deliver the council homes that we need for the country and social rent homes.
Thank you very much. Lib Dem question 2 is on homelessness support in cold weather. Councillor Clark, you've got 2 supplementaries for Councillor Parsons.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor. Thank you very much for your response, Councillor Parsons. Point 4 on your response, you're very specific about the number of bed spaces being 115. I really wanted to know whether, unpack that figure a little bit more, i.e. Do we ever reach 115, why is it 115, and what happens if we exceed that level? So could you just unpack that figure for me, please?
Thank you very much, Joss. Thank you for your question. So yeah, the number of bed spaces that we make available is really based on the demand that we see during those because of the winter pressures that we see. So I had a review recently of our severe weather emergency protocol. Councillor Reddy and I spoke with officers and we discussed the multiple challenges around providing safe accommodation for rough sleepers during the worst of the winter weather. And we are very confident that working along with our partners, faith groups, for example, that we do have enough capacity for people when, as we've seen over the last 10 days, temperatures have dropped below zero, and it's hazardous for people to remain on the streets. So our outreach services and our partners across the city do fantastic work in not only providing safe accommodation for people when the weather turns, but also using those instances as an opportunity to help people and support people into move-on accommodation. So those figures are based on the need that we see at the moment, and we're confident that even with a changing climate and a likely increase in the number of severe weather emergencies in future, we're going to be able to cope with that demand. Thank you.
Do you have a second supplementary, Councillor Clark?
I think actually in reality I had about 3 questions in mind anyway, so I think I did pretty well out of that.
That's very kind of you. Thank you very much. Okay, so we now move on to Conservative question 2 on Bristol Waste. That's from Councillor Glandris. You've got 2 supplementaries for Councillor Fodor.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Martin, thank you for your answers, and on behalf of my group, may we extend our best wishes to you for a full and speedy recovery. My supplementary question is this. I was reading Bristol Waste's draft business plan, and there was no mention in that of customer satisfaction levels, staff satisfaction levels, or trying to reduce missed bin collections. Can you give me an assurance that when the final business plan of Bristol Waste is produced, it will include those vital elements?
Yes, yeah, thank you for that. Yes, I will certainly do what I can. I think they should be addressed, so I'll press for that.
Thank you. My second supplementary is this. Clearly, there are lots of complaints about Bristol Waste at the moment. It's cross-party, and everybody's asking, why are there suddenly so many missed collections and what's going wrong? I do wonder whether the fundamental problem might be that Bristol Waste is actually underfunded. I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
Yes, the start of the missed collections and the 14 months that we've had of those missed collections was the removal of funding from the business plan 2 years ago, which led to the first rerouting in November 2023, followed by a subsequent rerouting and then a final rerouting in summer last. And in fact, 4 more crews have been put back into the service in an effort to reduce those problems. But there is a legacy of some rerouting issues, which we're trying to address one by one, where we find there are rounds that haven't been kind of correctly laid out. And there was a very high level of sickness and so on and vehicle breakdowns in December. In fact, the latest figures show extremely high, almost complete accurate collection rate in the last week, and I'm really glad to say it's caught up thanks to the measures that have been taken. But we need to have a properly funded service for the service we want and expect, and I would certainly be pressing for that.
Thank you very much. So now we move on to Green question 3 on a circular bus route for East Bristol. This is from Councillor Levan. You've got one supplementary for Councillor Plowden.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thanks for the considered the long response on this one. I'm glad to see that circular bus routes are definitely on the radar, and that people in the council are aware that buses into and out of the city don't serve the city as is needed. I also was interested to note that the delivery of the additional bus gates through the livable neighbourhoods is actually a precursor to potentially putting some circular bus routes in. And I think that it would be really good for residents of Bristol to understand that when they currently may not know what those bus gates are for. What does seem to underpin a lot of the considerations, however, in the response is the direct profit necessary for bus companies. And isn't it the case that there are multiple pecuniary and non-pecuniary benefits to additional bus routes? Public services shouldn't be about profit, because the profit isn't necessarily in money you can count. We all know that for every £1 you invest, you may see another £10 return. Also, they disproportionately benefit those who do not have cars.
Councillor Van, can we get on to your supplementary question, please?
So, is it therefore to say that bus franchising would help to put a decent and extended bus service for the people of Bristol before profit, and many wider social and economic benefits would follow? And can you confirm what the current impediments to franchising buses in Bristol are?
So that's it. Well, where do I start? Thank you for your question. The Institute of Public Policy Research just published something that showed that there's been an enormous cost to society with the removal of some of our buses, and particularly some of the subsidies over the last 10 years or so to buses. So I think you're absolutely right. There's a really good multiplier effect that comes from public transport, and it's something that is difficult to cost, and it's very difficult to factor into a profit-making business. Franchising would be a really good one of the part of the solution to this. Not least as at the moment competition law says you can't run unprofitable services if you're a bus company. So what we'd like to see is some of the profit being reinvested from the very busy services being reinvested in services that are probably never going to really achieve the level of profit that would require a bus company in order to be able to operate those sorts of services. I think back in 1988, when this law went through, there was this idea that there'd be so many bus companies competing to run buses that it would be anti-competitive to run them on unprofitable routes. But of course, the reality is they're not profitable for anyone, and we just don't get those routes. So franchising would sort this out in a very short amount of time. If I was to say what was the key block to franchising, it is a number of big steps to take, and it's quite expensive. You've got to be very determined, and we've seen Manchester take something like 4 or 5 years to do it. The Labour government has promised to make that a lot easier, so I think it is kind of wise to wait at the moment. So we see how much easier that's going to be. It's certainly a good threat to have in any negotiations with operators and to try and make the extended partnership work. But I think I would like to say that I've been very disappointed that all 3 unitary authorities have now sat in their council chambers, passed a motion saying we really need to look at franchising, and I'm afraid the Metro Mayor just keeps kicking it into the long grass. So that's really one of the big impediments that we've had in the last few years. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So Labour question 3 on the East Bristol Liberal neighbourhood. That's Councillor Breckles for Councillor Plowden. 1 supplementary, please.
Well, actually, when I submitted this question, these questions, I put in 2 questions. I don't know how they got re-edited to 1, so I've actually got 2 supplementaries.
Yes, I only saw 1 question mark, but well, go ahead then. If you want to ask 2 supplementaries, that seems reasonable.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, my Lord Mayor. And thank you for your answers. So the first supplementary is, will you commit to adapt or, if necessary, remove those elements of the EBLN that have led to unintended consequences? For example, the increased traffic and pollution on Cruise Hole Road, where what we actually need to do is reduce traffic.
Sorry, I didn't catch the very first part of that question.
Sure. Okay. Will you commit to adapt or, if necessary, remove those elements of the EBLN that have led to unintended consequences?
Well, this is a trial, and the whole point of this is that after 6 months we can identify what the unintended consequences have been and tweak the scheme. If this has been shown to reduce traffic and improve the quality on most of the roads, then of course we're going to keep it. If it shows that there's been really poor consequences, then we'll have to review how we can make the scheme work better or what changes need to be made. As you know, there's quite a large budget ready to put permanent measures in, which would include things like Cruise Hole Road and things like better trees and all sorts of things. But we can't do that until we really don't want to put those things in and commit to those big interventions unless the scheme has been successful. And so that budget could be used for all sorts of purposes, which might include changing some or taking out some of the modal filters, but might also include putting some permanent measures in. There is actually a budget to do some better crossings and things like that on Cruise Hill Road, and whilst we are in an enforced bit of pause, I have raised the question of the team about it was going to be that we put in all the EBLN measures and then move on to Cruise Hole Road. I've asked the question of the team if we could just reverse that while we've got a bit of a pause on in the face of the protests that we've been having to think about.
That would be very welcome, thank you. My second question is, I'm worried that forcing more traffic onto the Lawrence Hill roundabout, which I understand could happen with the next phases of the EBLN, the ones in Barton Hill and so on, will hold up the bus services through my ward and the wider area. So can you please commit to ensuring that any further rollout of the EBLN won't have an adverse impact on our buses and people getting to work on time?
That's the whole point of the EBLN, really, is to try and speed things up. We're working with the bus company now. We're actually looking at what sort of data they can give us to make sure this is being managed well. I think actually when it comes to Lawrence Hill roundabout, there's some really quite good dedicated bus infrastructure there. So I'm not that worried about there, but obviously further back that we may have a bit of a problem. I absolutely commit that one of the things we'll be looking at is both bus patronage and the reliability of buses. And I have had words with First. At the moment, they haven't seen a big surge in capacity, so that apart from one single bus down that corridor, there's not a problem. But they have committed that if the buses do start filling up some more, then they'll switch out the gas buses, which have a seating of about 70, for other buses which have a seating of about 90, because at the moment it's gas buses on the majority of the vehicles on that route have been gas buses. So that would be a really quick and easy switch without a lot of investment from us.
Thank you very much. So next we've got Conservative question 3 on the Bristol Waste Community Hub. Councillor Eddy, you've got 2 supplementary questions for Councillor William.
Indeed, Lord Mayor. Can I thank Councillor Williams for his replies? Clearly, my information was somewhat premature, but assuming Bristol Waste proposed to decommission these assets in 2027 or before, will he, in principle, encourage property services to dispose of these and or other citywide assets for the local community's benefit, please?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Richard, for your supplementary. As I understand it, the street cleansing service, who still use the toilets on Bridgewater Road, operate out of 3 depots across the city. Clearly, the cleansing service need comfort breaks in all parts of the city, and the network of former public toilets is useful in that regard. I mean, that may not change, of course, in the future. It'd be surprising if it did. But if some of the toilets that are currently used by Bristol Waste are returned to the council, I think we will just follow the normal disposal rules where an asset is declared surplus to requirements. I think first of all we look inside the council whether we might have alternative uses for it, and if not, offer it for sale or indeed community asset transfer.
Do you have another supplementary, Councillor Eddy? Thank you very much. So now we move on to Green Question 4 on the Mead Street framework from Councillor Plowden. One supplementary for Councillor Brown.
No supplementaries, my Lord Mayor. Thank you for the... very pleased to see that what has previously been dodged is now going to be grasped.
Thank you very much. I believe Councillor Renard and Councillor Michelat are not here, so we'll move on to Green Question 5, collaborating with the West of England Mayoral Combined Authority on taxis. There's one supplementary from Councillor Malik for Councillor Plowden.
Thank you for the response to the question. I just have a supplement in terms of, do you think there would be an opportunity for some type of forum or collaboration with the taxi trade of Bristol to work with WECA maybe?
I certainly hope so, and I'd like to make sure that we're, obviously the taxi service is a really important part of the transport mix and very much part of the public transport mix, and I'd really like to make sure we've seen a shocking reduction in the number of people willing to operate hackneys in the current way that the market works, and that's a real pity for people who are disabled because the hackneys has been a really important part of that mobility solution. So I think it's really important that we have the space and time working with WECA and ideally South Gloucestershire, who seem to be licensing a lot of these cars, to hear the voice of the drivers, because that's a really important part of the mix.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next we move on to Labour Question 5 on fly tipping. Councillor Dudge, you've got one supplementary for Councillor Fodor.
Yeah, thanks for your answer, Martin. And yeah, sorry, I didn't know you had an accident actually, so I hope you get well soon. The reason I'm asking this question is because there's an estate in my ward, the 28 acres estate, and it's a bit of a fly tipping hotspot. And I'm constantly reporting fly tips, and residents are, but it's taken weeks and weeks for those fly tips to be removed. And apparently the reason is because it's on HRA land, but you wouldn't know that by walking. It just looks like a normal street. So I'm a bit concerned that people on HRA land are getting a kind of a second-class service. And then more generally about the 72-hour target, it doesn't, from the answer, it doesn't seem like we've got that information in terms of how we're performing against that 72-hour target. I don't know whether that's because the way I've asked the question, or we just don't keep that information, but such an important KPI, like how quickly we're removing fly tips, I assume that is being recorded properly, so it'd be good to get that information.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That would be helpful information in terms of the performance against that. And we'll have to have a discussion about how the HRA, how we liaise with the HRA, because there seems to be this ownership issue, which I hadn't been aware of previously. So thanks for raising it, and we'll see if we can find a much smoother procedure for that.
Thank you. And Councillor Fodor, don't worry about standing up. You please remain seated. That's quite all right. So Councillor Udin isn't here, so we'll move on to Green question 6 on licensing reform advocacy. That's also for Councillor Malik. One supplementary for Councillor Williams and Councillor Plowden, so you can decide who's going to answer this. That really does help. Thank you.
So sitting on the Public Safety and Protection Committee especially, and looking at a lot of the gaps in legislation, I suppose, I think it's really important that at some point there is a commitment to engaging with local MPs and other councils to develop a unified lobbying effort. Can this be done, and can we put a timeline to it maybe?
I think that's just an adjunct to the yes I gave you a few minutes ago, really, isn't it? Is that a reasonable response?
Yeah, I suppose I just need a commitment to it so that something can happen. And a timeline,
I think we'll have to
maybe.
look at what the proposals are.
I think there's a review in the whole framework.
And I'd definitely like to make sure that if Bristol's responding to the the national consultation, then that we're hearing a 360-degree voice, so both from passengers and from drivers.
Thank you very much. So Labour question 6 on congestion charging from Councillor Self. We're going to hear a verbal response from Councillor Plowden.
Here's one I prepared earlier. So the amendment you reference is from a long time ago, and things have moved on a little bit since. I think it is worth mentioning that, of course, it's Labour Party policy in London, because there's a congestion charge in operation in London. The congestion problem in our city costs our regional economy £300 million every year, and apparently every year there are 65 hours of delay per average driver. So I think we can all agree that there needs to be a range of measures to tackle congestion and achieve a rapid shift in greener travel in the city for the sake of our health, our climate, as well as our economy. At the moment, the focus is on a workplace parking levy paid for by large employers in the city on staff car parking bays that they may receive free. The Bristol Green Party believes that this is a fair and effective next step in managing transport demand. It would appear that a workplace parking levy will take us approximately 3 years to install, and this is our priority rather than a blanket congestion charge. The revenue raised will be invested in transport, and the priority is in better public transport and furthering mass transit proposals. If we were to progress with the congestion charge at some point in the future, then we would work with partner organisations to develop financially sound, fair and evidence-based proposals to ensure we are tackling congestion in a positive and equitable way that improves the overall transport system.
Councillor Self, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please, Lord Mayor. Thank you for that very comprehensive reply, but it was a fairly sort of simple question. Are congestion charges still Green Party policy? And I just wondered if you could maybe answer in sort of yes or no to that one.
At the present moment, no. It's not our policy to install one in Bristol. I'm aware that other Green parties may have other ideas for their cities, because we're kind of a very locally based organisation, not centrally controlled, and it may be that other Green parties and other Labour parties, like in London, do support congestion charging. But our priority at the moment is clearly on workplace parking levy as the first step.
Thank you very much. So Councillor Morris, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Martin and Councillor Morris again are not here, I believe. So we'll move on to Labour question 8 on healthcare infrastructure from Councillor Hornchin, who's got one supplementary for Councillor Brown.
Thank you for the answer. The one I wanted to ask you, as a representative of our residents, can we assume that we know that what's going on between the ICB and influence the ICB to make sure that healthcare infrastructure is part of the city's plans in the future? Because at the moment it feels very opaque and we can't actually see what's happening.
Thank you for that. This is something that we're deeply conscious of. Getting to the bottom of and making sure that these things are taken into account. In my ward, I face these same challenges. We've got a big development in my ward and a doctor's practice that is, that is stretched at present. So we're really keen to get ahead of the problem or to work to get ahead of the problem, but to square that circle, which is the overlapping responsibilities between what the council does and what the health board, integrated care board is responsible for. But I know that officers are working hard on that issue, and I'll be working with my chair colleagues and the political leadership as well to seek to address that. We're also, as a committee, going to be doing some work on looking at how this affects plays into the sort of broader viability questions in terms of delivering the houses and homes that we need for the city. And I dare say at some point it might also fall within the West of England Combined Authority remit as and when they get additional responsibility for strategic planning in the region.
Thank you very much. So we move on to Conservative question 8 on ensuring important Bristol artefacts. That's actually from Councillor Hucker, I believe. Councillor Hucker, you've got 2 supplementary, should you wish.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you for your response, Leader. No supplementaries, but I look forward to the confidential briefing to the Audit Committee. Thanks.
Thank you, Roger. Just saying, I'm keeping a very careful eye on my chains at the moment, so hopefully, to lose 2 would be unfortunate, I think, or carelessness, whatever the expression is. Okay, so let's move on. It's now Labour question 9 on Bristol waste pay. That's Councillor Dudd for Councillor Dyer. You've got 1 supplementary, Councillor Dudd.
Yeah, thanks for the answer here. Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned with this one because the pay rise for Bristol Waste was due in November last year. So obviously negotiations are ongoing, but it seems from the answer that the company's not in a position to settle those pay talks because the business plan for next year is not agreed. So it seems a bit odd to me that the company are in negotiations with the union, but they don't know what they can settle on yet. So for me, that sounds like a recipe for disaster and mistrust between the negotiators. So I just wondered if you could shed more light. And I think you sit on the board, don't you, Tony, of the company? No? But you're the
Councillor Hucker is the
right.
non-executive director.
But you represent the council as the shareholder of the company. So I'm just a bit worried that we'll get into a situation in a few months where we're talking about an industrial action ballot. And given all the problems in the company and service standards and that, it's something that we should try to avoid.
Thanks, Kai. I agree. It is something we are keeping an eye on and being updated on. Also, there is the additional complication of the change to national insurance contributions, which is also a major increase in costs for Bristol Waste, even though it's done for the right reasons. All I can do is I can assure you that both myself, Councillor Caroline Goots, and Nick, as the shareholder representatives, are paying very close attention to what's happening. And obviously we want to make sure that whatever deal is done is a fair deal for the workforce at Bristol Waste.
Thank you very much. Councillor El Maghrabi isn't here, so we move on to Labour question 11 on wood burners. Councillor Saff, you've got 1 supplementary for Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you for the very detailed response, much appreciated. I just want to say on the first point, I'd like you to maybe check that because I do see contradictory information that perhaps suggests £1,000 fines can be made for unauthorised fuel, but who knows what the internet says these days. But my follow-up question's on point 5 in your response. I see in public forum at full council this afternoon, PQ34 mentions supporting Clean Air Night on January the 25th. I just wondered if you thought that might be a good idea as a publicity campaign.
Lord Mayor, I'd like to thank Councillor for bringing that particular initiative to my attention. I didn't know January the 25th was Clean Air Night, so thank you for that. And I think it's actually it's quite a good idea that we'll speak with our public affairs and marketing, public relations and marketing colleagues to try and use that day to draw to people's attention that while burning wood or other fuels is legal, and many people do it, including in my street, that what you burn is actually quite important. You should really only burn wood in particular from good suppliers where it's been kiln dried and particularly is wet. So I think there's a lot of public information we could bring to light on that, and thank you for mentioning that date, which I will now check with colleagues.
Thank you very much. So that concludes member forum questions. I'll now take member statements in order of receipt. I remind members that a maximum of 1 minute will be allowed for the presentation of each statement. There will be no debate on the statements and they will be referred to the leader for consideration. So the first statement is from Councillor Joss Clark on waste collection. Councillor Clark, you've got 1 minute, please.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Obviously, we've had an awful lot of questions, etc., about bins in Bristol, and I wanted to sort of put my 2 pennies worth in as well, and somebody else in my group had put in questions about bins, so I decided to go down the statement route. As a resident in Bristol at the moment, I put my bins out with hope rather than expectation at the moment, and I'm sure we all feel the same. But as a councillor, the day after we're meant to have a bin delivery or bin collection, I sort of filled with dread, really, because I know that we are going to get a whole slew of angry residents emailing us. Martin, you said that you didn't know which roads were not getting regular bin collections. I can tell you, and I bet you everybody in this room can tell you, it's the same houses every single time, because the bin lorry gets full and then it goes back to the depot. It doesn't go back out and pick up those. I've got residents, I can tell you the roads where they're just not getting their bins emptied because the bin lorry never gets that far. I bet everybody here has exactly the same experience. And it's really shameful as a city that we're in this situation, because it's our residents' one interaction with the council. Every week they put their bin out and they expect to get it emptied and come back in. That is the one interaction we all have. The other thing I think is worth mentioning...
Councillor Clark, if you could sum up very quickly, please.
Yeah, I will do. Is people are writing to us saying it's a conspiracy. They're changing the bin collection by stealth, and this is all a conspiracy to change the bins. Now, we need to change that conversation, and we need to turn that round to being a positive thing, because at the moment it's not at all positive, and it cannot continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fraser isn't here, so we move on to statement number 3 from Councillor Fabian Breckles on the East Bristol Liberal neighbourhood.
I mean, basically, I stand by everything that it says, and I think we do need to, and one thing I do want to draw out from that is the issue of emergency vehicles that have been getting blocked. And so it's very important that we are consulting with, you know, the emergency services, taxi companies, because I've had people telling me that taxis aren't getting through, or, you know, delivery companies, you know, if you order something online, they can't deliver it. You know, there is a need to, you know, have these consultations and, you know, make sure that, you know, if somebody needs an urgent, you know, needs to be picked up in an ambulance, or needs, you know, they've got a fire that needs putting out, that the emergency services can get there quickly and safely.
Thank you very much. So that concludes the statements and the meeting. We now have a break, and we'll be back here at 2 o'clock for the commencement of full council. Thank you very much, everyone.